Welcome to the Nature-Based Therapy podcast, where we explore the healing power of nature through inspiring stories and guided experiences. Let's reconnect with the wild within. So welcome to the Nature-Based Therapy podcast. Today, our guest is Dr. Lani Roy, and welcome, Lani.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Wonderful. So, Lani, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and what you do and what drew you to nature-based therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a social worker and psychologist and researcher, and I guess over the last 8 years I've really been focusing more on psychedelics and plant medicine. And that comes from a long history working in complex trauma and mainly in sexual abuse therapy, where the clients that I have work with have experienced enormous disconnect from their bodies, from their families, from their culture, their land, from spirituality. And, I guess holding that amount of pain for a really long time led me to really seek out novel treatments for myself when I was about 30. And that's what led me to go to the jungle and experience ayahuasca, but then also develop as many tools as I possibly can to support my clients, because although mainstream treatments can be helpful for some people, a lot of the people that I work with, had tried so many of the modalities for decades, and it really hadn't scratched the surface. So, yeah, really dedicating my work now to a couple of things. I'm the one of the founding board members and chair of AMAP, which is the Australian Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Practitioners. So we're a grassroots member organisation that are really passionate about developing and looking after practitioners in this space, and offering supervision and webinars and a community and small conferences, and just really cultivating that it takes multidisciplinary people in this space, not just psychiatrists and psychologists, but the whole range: art therapists, Indigenous healthcare workers, right through the whole spectrum of professionals. So that's my passion project, and work with a really incredible team of volunteers. And and we're excited to bring in things like arts and nature-based therapies, and not just clinical learning, but tools for practitioners to access with their clients. And then, me and my best friend and colleague, Melissa Warner, have launched our Anamkara Centre, which is the Centre for Psychedelics and Contemplative Therapies. And we have our next cohort starting in August. And a big part of that is weaving in not just like clinical psychedelic science, but electives such as herbalism with Lily of the Herbs, and also dieta, so ayahuasca plant medicine dietas in Peru for practitioners, and to connecting with the jungle there and the lineage, and lots and lots of other things, but they're my main projects and passion at the moment.
Wonderful. And Lani, can I ask you about your own personal experience of connecting with nature from early childhood? Like, was there something, what was your experience of being in nature at a young age? Because I also like to explore how that kind of informs our relationship with the natural world and what leads us to do what we do as adults. Do you have any special memories of early childhood experiences in nature?
Absolutely. I grew up in Lara originally. Migrated from Northern Ireland when I was really little. Parents got away from the troubles there, and then moved to Lara, which is like a small country town near Geelong. And we had 5 acres, and I had the most incredible garden for myself. I had horses. I had we had birds, chickens. I had a little paradise, and my brother and sister were a bit older, so it was often me playing in the garden and gardening myself. And I had herbs and a huge range of plants, so I was really, really connected as a little one. And then, and I've shared this before on a herbalism podcast recently, that it was only about a year ago that I realized, that there was a big disconnect when I moved to Torquay. So I was about 12, and for high school, my parents decided to move us and do a sea change to this beautiful property in Torquay. But at 12, big bit of a trigger warning. Um, Someone that I went to primary school, he committed suicide, and he was 12. He was a twin. Um, and there was something that fundamentally changed in me at that time of my life, like going from being 12, you know, having my town, my school, and then all of a sudden being introduced to pretty, adult concepts that no one really knew what to do with. There was no therapy offered or school support or anything like that.
Mm.
Um, so that really changed something changed there. And then, when I moved to Torquay, even though it's got the most incredible beaches and land there, that began, basically my segue into early, substance use, because there was substances everywhere, every corner, every shop that you turned as a young person. So although I grew up in Torquay with the most incredible land, and we would often go to the hills and, have fires there and be on the beach all night, and um, there was a certain part of me that was not connected into the land, that it took me a long time to rediscover. Mm.
Thank you for sharing that. And what place does nature have in your role now, like for your own personal self-care as well? How do you bring nature connection into
Mm.
that, and looking back at kind of your journey and
Mm.
what shaped you to do what you're doing now to support and help other people?
Yeah.
How do you bring that into your personal life, and has that changed?
Well, I'm very much a city chick. I love the city. I live in the city. I think I will always live in the city, but I know I can feel in my body now when I am contracting, and when I need to expand, and that can still happen in my little garden here. I've got this beautiful San Pedro garden. You don't need a lot to be able to plug into nature, so I can kind of feel it more in my body when I'm starting to get um, really contracted. A lot of academic work, a lot of staring at my computer, and being able to reset and expand with nature. Also, exploring herbalism slowly but surely with Lily of the Herbs. So I've done herbalism apprenticeship, and just learning about how to work with plants, whether through tinctures, teas, balms, how to bring that into my kitchen. It's not something that I'm very natural at. I'm learning to be a witch. Um,
Mm,
but there's just so many plants and so many um, ways to intentionally sit down and be with a tea. I also love, you can probably hear my French bulldogs snoring in the background, but for me, they are I've got two French bulldogs, Magic and Mushroom. And
love the
you know
name.
I was I was thinking the other day that, because they feel like my totem, they feel like my spirit kind of animal, and why is that? And it's because they, not only they full of love, and they do not hide their love, like they kiss and cuddle, and they attack you with just passion and love and excitement. And yeah, I said to my children, there is no animal that meets me at my level of like how I actually feel inside, because I'm very energetic. I'm very passionate. I'm very tactile. If I was allowed to like kiss and cuddle everyone, I would. And I think that's a bit of the ADHD in me. But my dogs are unbelievable allies of support for me. And if I, work all day with some pretty heavy stuff, like pretty, a lot of abuse, they're just like a power pack of hope and love and silliness. And yeah, so I think helping clients also, connect into their animals and their nature, and because the world can get very complex, but being around a pet, things can get pretty simple pretty quickly. They love you, and they need you, and they care about you, and they're excited when you walk in the door. And some,
Mm.
helping people to reconnect back to some of that simplicity. Really important.
And it's unconditional too, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, something very sweet and
Beautiful.
innocent about it.
You made a really important point around, when we connect to nature, it's not always going out to nature, but it's what can we bring nature into our own home?
Mm,
Whether that's through our pets or whether it's through plants or herbalism.
mm,
Nature connection can happen anywhere at any time. And I think that's the great thing about it. It's
mm,
so adaptable, it's flexible, and it meets you at where you're at,
mm,
and it meets clients at where they're at. So we're kind of exploring, what are the different ways we can introduce nature-based interventions into a person's life? And often I'll let people know I do nature-based therapy over telehealth,
mm,
and
mm.
working with the client in their own space, whether it's inviting them to go into their front yard, their backyard, and do sessions as well.
Yes.
And inviting people to, go to Bunnings or pot your own plants and let's bring nature inside. So they're kind of really good examples.
Mm,
And other
mm,
than with working with plant medicines as well, is there any other
mm,
ways you bring any nature-based interventions in or use nature as a
mm,
metaphoric language when we're looking at how does
mm.
nature work and then how do we bring that into psychotherapy as well?
Yes. Oh, there's many things. I guess, me and Melissa spent a long time developing our model for our psychedelic course, and we use the metaphor of swim, and that stands for somatics, wisdom, interdependence, and metacognition, and they're the kind of chapters and topics we journey through. But I love using nature metaphors for, really, complex things such as phenomena and psychedelics. But we use the metaphor of, if you go out into the vast ocean of consciousness and through psychedelics or altered state work, if you don't have the tools and resources, you can drown or you can really struggle, and you can return to shore exhausted and broken, or or you can learn to swim. And I guess that's our metaphor for our program, is swimming in the oceans of consciousness and having all these resources, and not only able to support yourself, but be a life boat for those around you. So yeah, beautiful with meditations, being able to use guided imagery with nature. A lot of people that I work with, when I ask them to evoke, a nurturer, a wise being, or I guess, an elder, sometimes if they've had a lot of trauma from humans, they evoke animals and or trees and plants through that. So you can really
Mm.
start to help people build their connection back, not always through people first, but through symbols and through nature and plants and animals. And yeah, I've got some beautiful friends who are very talented, where we do, earth altars in the ground to signify whether it's a woman's day or a birthday, or change of seasons through equinox or solstice. Very big pieces on the ground where we bring flowers and ornaments and crystals, and take photos of them as well. And I've got some beautiful art pieces where that event, has been symbolized on the earth. We've all put our intentions in, and then now, we've got it in our home, which is like that nature-based kind of memory body that you can bring into art form, which is really special.
I love that. And you also highlight the importance of doing nature-based connections with community
Mhm.
and the importance of that shared community. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that? Because I know that's really important in your work
Mm.
too, having community, and what
Yeah.
is the importance of community?
Yeah, and I'm very, very blessed to have different communities. So I'm starting to work with an Ashaninka family in Peru, which works with ayahuasca and plant medicines. So, I mean, that community is very different. The jungle can be quite harsh. It can be quite wild, and there's a whole cultural context around that, which I'm learning, and will take forever to learn because it's a whole new language. But I've also got community in the bush. I've got community um, in other hilly lands. So I'm very blessed that I've got different communities on different landscapes, and each land has its own, obviously Indigenous lineage we've woven through it, but different feel to it. You know, some lands are quite harsh, some are wild, others are more remind me of Ireland, like the rolling hills.
Mm.
And yeah, I feel because I'm blessed to have such deep friendships and those lands, I actually feel supported, not just in my home, you know, but also like I've got these like little tribes all around Australia and overseas that and we've also got a direct connection to some of the lineage holders in Machu Picchu and in Peru, and just feeling, yeah, I don't feel alone. I feel very supported, very anchored in earth and also in lineage and people who are very deeply engaged with the mystery of life and have deep reverence for the nature. Often when we do a big fruit platter, um, as a community, we'll often pray over the fruit and then give the earth the best pieces of the platter and bury it. And it's,
Mm.
often I'm quite hungry at that point, and it's quite funny to watch the human form go, no, 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 don't give the earth that passion fruit and chocolate, give it to me. And to witness how much as
Yeah.
Westerners we want to click our fingers when we're hungry and just get what we want, which is a real privilege because of how many people around the world don't have fresh food and water.
Mm.
So in those simple offerings, you catch yourself going, okay, how lucky I am that we can just have all this fresh fruit and chocolate and then yeah, giving it back to the earth as that symbol of irony and reciprocity. Mm.
It is. It's that reciprocal relationship with the natural world.
Mm.
Going.
Sorry, it froze there.
Yeah, I think it froze a little bit. I think it's that reciprocal relationship that we have with the natural world that makes nature-based therapy so effective, and that nature connection as well. Um, and I love that you bring up the fruit platter, because that's something I'll often say to people, even if it's just offering a fruit platter in a group therapy workshop.
Mm.
And offering fruit, you have that nature experience. And we talked about nature-based mindfulness through the course, and how do we connect to our senses? And you can easily connect to your five senses and do nature-based mindfulness just with a fruit platter or a piece of fruit. You
Mm.
know, our smell and our taste and our touch, and you've got the visual parts. And I love that extra bit that you do, is that offering back to the earth.
Mm.
And how do we have that relationship with the earth, and to give back and have gratitude, which I think
Mm.
is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yes.
thank you that. And I love the mention of the altars as well, and that
Mm.
symbolic, again, relationship to earth, and having those special things that we have
Mm.
connection to, and then placing them on an altar, whether that's individual or whether it's as a collective.
Yeah, it's very special. You know, we just ran out one of our courses and having a community altar where we opened, as we always do, we opened with all the students bringing something that's symbolic to them and then placing it at the center. And a lot of people brought obviously, crystals and different earth-based medicines, and it's just really beautiful. Like that's the symbolic imprint of the course and the container. Um, and people feel it, whether you believe in energy or not, it's that symbolic realm of, everyone here has contributed something special to this group, and we've got this art piece in the center of the room to represent that. So yes, but I've got some very talented connections and friends and their family members. There's Earth Altars in Byron Bay, and what they do is something next level with their pieces. So yeah, I'm just a novice compared to some of these people that have been doing this for decades in the most creative kind of art forms. Incredible.
And it is an art form, isn't it? And
Yeah.
often we talk about, when we connect to nature-based therapy or nature, we're really tapping into that right side of the brain, which
Mm.
is about creativity and curiosity and, imagination. And that's where you get your problem solving from.
Mm.
Are you
Mm.
able to talk a little bit more, like from your perspective of being a psychologist as well, and looking at the right side of the brain and how that really supports us to connect to nature?
Well, I'm not very, Melissa would be far better, versed to respond to that. She's a neuroscientist whiz and what she knows about the brain. Um, for me, I don't necessarily focus on the brain so much, but more on, I guess, the body and embodiment and, how people are feeling in their bodies, because often, people have a real cognitive understanding of their feelings. Like they might know that they're sad, or they might know that they have compassion for someone else, but it's not until they're really, in their body that they drop into deeper layers. And that's where I find, when I've sat, obviously in the jungle in medicine, or supporting clients with ketamine or cannabis in their homes, in their nature-based spaces, when people have an opening that's supported by nature, as well as, a process, that they drop into deeper levels of knowing in their body. So it's really bottom up processing. It's less, cognitive. So,
Mm-hmm.
they might know that they've been sad about the loss of a loved one, but now they know, they can feel it. They can, in their bones and in their emotions. And I think this is the real the benefits of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, but in nature-based settings, because I think there are some limitations in the universities and in the clinics and, small rooms and the clinical context, because there is a whole medicine that is offered through the land and through nature elements, and people, the opening and the, I guess, the access to awe and wonderment, you're only going to go so far in a clinical room, in my opinion. It's still a start and it's still incredible,
Mm-hmm.
but when you compare it to people, cracking open, but also being held by the forest or the jungle, it's really something else.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key element, is that nature is co-therapist with us when we're
Mm,
working in nature. And it goes back to that evidence-based research of the biophilia hypothesis from
mm,
Edward O. Wilson that
mm,
looks at we are nature. We're not separate from the natural world. It's our biophilia. So when we're in nature, we're
mm,
innately going through that healing process already. And
mm,
then when we're, further enhancing that nature connection through using plant medicine,
mm,
it's really that great foundation that we're starting in the natural world, and then we're enhancing that through the plant medicine.
mhm. Yeah,
Can you tell me
absolutely.
a little bit about, if someone's interested in exploring plant medicine and they're really wanting to take that next level in nature-based therapy? So they've connected with nature, they're practicing some nature-based mindfulness, maybe doing some nature journaling, and they're really benefiting from nature connection, but they want to explore it a little bit deeper, like you've just explained, really dropping into the body through the facilitation of plant medicine through a trained facilitator. How do they navigate that? And what is your advice for someone who wants to explore that?
Well, I guess there's some practical limitations at the moment in Australia. We don't really have decriminalisation. So there's a little bit of decriminalisation in Canberra, but it's still, I mean, minuscule amounts of medicine. So I guess there is that, it's illegal in Australia unless you go through a facilitator and through a psychiatrist. And, um, you know, and that at the moment it's between $17,000 and $30,000 to have a really rigorous, and they are doing an amazing job for rigor and, protocols, and but the reality is it's quite, inaccessible, and there's a lot of complexities around choice of, set and setting. And as I said, not everyone wants to do these medicines with a psychiatrist or in a clinical team. So the reality is many people do go overseas to retreat-based centres that are legal or decriminalised. And there's, I don't do any recommendations. It's such a personal choice, and I support people to have a session to have like proper psycho ed, because every single person is different, their needs, and so I never make any blanket, recommendations. But I guess what I would suggest is that you don't always have to have a psychedelic to have, a plant medicine experience. There's many people that are working with, um, non-psychoactive tincture dietas. So where they spend, a week sitting with rose tea, and they might drink the rose tea morning and night. They also, have a really strict diet of like pure foods, also bathing in rose, beautiful rose baths, and leaving water by the moon, and having the plant seep in it, and then singing at various points throughout that process. And there's many, many configurations of working with plant medicine or herbalism. Doesn't have to be, the full psychedelic experience. And what we're finding, particularly, women that do some of the non-psychoactive plant medicine processes, it's really beautiful. It's really soft and working on the subtle realms. And, um, you know, people want, they want psychedelics and they want to have this peak experience, but you also need to be really in tune with the subtle realms for any of that to land. So I guess, yeah, explore other options. It doesn't have to be straight to the top. And you want to make sure people get harm reduction and just really safe facilitators, because these are powerful substances, and there's a lot of, really good intention people thinking they're ready to work with them, but they might not be. There's a lot of complex mental health issues and people who've got serious psychiatric illnesses that are potentially going into containers where the people aren't able to support them as well. So yeah, speak to a good integration, uh, therapist, and work out, what's the safest option, I would suggest. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's really, really good advice. And I love the point that you brought up around, working with other plant medicines. Um, and it's what it sounds like. You can integrate this into your everyday life.
Mm,
So it's something that's probably more sustainable. It's enacting more self-healing.
mm, mm.
It's accessible, it's affordable.
Yeah.
It's something that can be learned in a community setting.
Mm,
But then you take that learning and integrate that into your everyday life
mm.
for continuous care. And I think that's where real change happens, is when we're introduced to
Mm.
concepts that are accessible, they're
Yes.
affordable. And that's a good thing. The beautiful thing with nature and working with plant medicine or any different plant medicines is that we can use them in our everyday life.
Mm.
And
Yes.
change is achievable, especially I think in the short term, as long as we have that consistency. And I always prescribe nature.
Mm.
I'll often say to my clients, 20 minutes every day, a walk in nature, but not just a walk, not with headphones on, not on
Mhm.
your phone, but actually noticing the
Mm.
birds, noticing the trees, the flowers in your neighbor's front yard, and
Mhm.
stopping for a moment to notice that snail crossing the path, and bringing
Mm.
in that kind of mindfulness and being
Mm.
in that present moment and processing that nature connection just in
Mm.
your everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a big, complex, expensive retreat. And what some of my friends are doing is actually, they've created a women's group where it's free, but we just rotate taking turns of um, different activities that we can do, with each other once a month. And, they're rotating through all sorts of different nature-based activities. And so also think about what you can harness from within your own group. Like, look at the skills in your friendship circle, and you can start your own women's group or men's group, or you know, any gender group. But people often think you have to pay and do things externally. It's like,
Mhm.
what have you got? What skills has your community got? And you can kind of rotate and have events. So yeah, we've just kicked that off, and my only battle is trying to get to them after taking my boys to sport, 3 or 4 times a week. Trying to figure out how to get myself somewhere is pretty tricky. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's some of this stuff can be quite simple, cheap, affordable. And part of my research that I did with Swinburne, with the Australian ayahuasca Deoterra community, one of the data streams was, that they didn't necessarily identify as a Deoterra after they'd done all their dietas. They really identified with, the Deoterra way of life, and that was, you know, basically connecting with plants, connecting with their properties, their relationship to the plants. And that was whether that was ayahuasca or rose or basil or puberty, it was irrelevant. Like it was that relational way of life that had really shifted for them. And it was really beautiful to see many examples in the data when I asked them, what had changed in their life. And it was the ayahuasca was just the starting point, and then it's just all those ripple on effects of embodied ways of being in the world that are just everyday activities that just become really delightful and supportive and nourishing.
And it sounds like it opens something up.
Mm, definitely. Yeah.
It opens up a shift in perception.
Mm. Mindset. Yeah.
It increases
Embodiment.
connection, and
Yeah.
you're almost that feeling alive,
Mm.
that sense of purpose and connection and belonging.
And interdependence, that field of being part of just this web of activity that's in and around us and through us. I think that's that life force that gets stomped out of so many children and people through trauma.
Mm.
A lot of once you really activate that web of interdependence and interconnection through nature, it's you a lot of people find that they're less alone. They feel less alone in this strange mystery floating in space. They can feel a bit more plugged into the web.
Yeah,
Mm.
I love that. And it's almost like a returning to our authentic self,
Mm. Yes. Yeah,
our
definitely.
authenticity outside of our trauma or our problems in life or our stresses in life,
Mm.
that we return home in a way.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the data is people saying it's a remembering of who they are and remembering so deep that it's beyond words and space and time. It's that kind of mysterious place that these medicines and nature, which I'm sure you've had many experiences when you've been out in nature, that there's no words for it. It's beyond words, and it's this field and this felt sense that you drop into that, and for a moment in time everything feels right and everything feels as it should be, and that's so healing for people. Mm.
Absolutely. And you mentioned before, Lani, I want to explore the community side of things, like community development. And I think, yeah, do we have to wait to join a service or a group? Do we have to wait for paid? But can we start our own collective? It might be that I remember I started down here on the Surf Coast before I had my last child, and life gets in the way with busyness with children. I had a women's walking group.
Mm.
And, I wanted to walk, but I didn't want to walk on my own. So I started and just put it out there.
Mm.
Any women out there want to come for a walk on a Monday morning? And I had a whole collective of women every Monday. We had a whole group of women just coming along and walking and talking. And, it was free. It was just people
Mm.
connecting, the networks that were formed and the friendships that were formed and people helping it. Like it just organically grew on its own into something
Beautiful.
so beautiful. And you're right, anyone can initiate and start.
Mm.
I think it's just about being brave and having courage and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and actually, a couple of years ago, a beautiful Indigenous woman called Casey ran a snow camp for children, and we took our children to the snow, and it was just incredible to see children face nature in a way that was like a rites of passage and an initiation, because my children had never ever skied. They didn't want to ski, they didn't want to go, and I was like, oh, okay, well, we're going, I've signed up. And um, to see my children go from not being able to ski, not wanting to ski, to a couple of days later completely flying down the mountain on their own. I couldn't believe it. And just the confidence and courage that nature gave them.
Mm.
So I think there's a whole nother piece around nature-based initiations as well for children. And because we're often in a bit of a comfort of our own home in the modern world. And there are rites of passages that can be achieved through camping, through trekking, through um, snow-based stuff. And it was a real incredible experience what happened on that adventure.
I
Yeah.
love that. And again, nature was holding space for that growth
Mhm.
to happen
Yes. Yeah.
and
And an
provide.
incredible facilitator. She's Bundjalung woman, and um, what she taught them in a short amount of time, and the confidence, and I just had to let go because I just had to watch them. They were little and they were just flying down that mountain, and I was like holding on for dear life. But
Wow.
yeah,
And
really special.
that will stay with them for the rest of their
Mm.
lives, you know, that
Yeah.
kind of, and that brings out our inner resilience as well,
Mm.
you know, and our capacity to be able to do things we never thought we were
Mm.
able to do. It just pushes you beyond that comfort zone and that window of tolerance that we often
Absolutely.
have to keep us safe.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
nature's great at doing that. I've been on many long hikes in Thailand and Malaysia, and it's like
Mm.
3 days, it's like backpack
Mm.
on, and it's just like,
Mm.
you do this, and you're at the end of it, and you're like, wow, like you
Mm.
look back and you think about the things that you
Mm.
endured and how you did certain things,
Yeah. Pride. Mm.
and pride, and it builds self-esteem, and it shapes, I think, who
Yeah.
you are and
Mm.
how you think you can do other things when, you know, stuff in life comes along. But those
Mhm.
experiences shape how we problem solve, and they also shape our capacity to believe in ourselves enough to get
Yeah.
over the hurdles in life that come to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I also think, my children get along really well, but when they swim, when they're in the ocean, when they're in nature, they just get a lot, they get along better. So I think there's something, yeah, really incredible about just getting people or children out in the elements. There's a neutralizing or humbling factor, or just something happens with the energy where, they're not as wild as being in the indoors, trapped inside. So yeah, shift that energy, I say. Get us all get our team meetings outside a little bit more.
Absolutely. And how do we bring nature
Mm.
connection into the workplace as
Mm.
well?
Mm.
Taking team meetings outside and kind of, yeah, stepping outside of the comfort zone, thinking outside of the box and doing things a little bit differently as well.
Mm.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share that you think is important? Any last nugget for anyone that might be listening and watching?
No, I just want to honor you and your dedication. We've known each other for years now, and off and on in different capacities, and you always work so hard with such joy and such passion, and it's I remember when we first met, I thought, are some of these, because I'm very deep in the academic scientific realms, I was like, is some of this stuff too basic for me? That was the honest kind of um, feeling. And, it's actually really interesting to reflect that it is these more like simple ways of being that we're completely disconnected from, as a culture and as a society. And it sounds, some of these things sound simple, but it's actually for a lot of people incredibly hard to get back to because of modern life and capitalism and technology. And so I think it is important, to have that balance, because science can really go deep and overcomplicate things sometimes. And we just need to, really take a breath and come back to these simple ways of being, which many cultures have, or many cultures have lost. And we're trying to scramble our way back to. So, yeah. So thank you
Absolutely.
for all
Thank
you're
you so
doing.
much,
Mm.
Lani. Yeah, and it's a lifestyle. It's very simple, and it's something
Mm.
that should be part of our everyday living, not something
Mm.
we do, but something we are.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you. Well, thank you for joining my podcast and
Yeah,
having a
fun.
conversation. It's been really, really lovely.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Thank you. And I'll stop recording. Thank you for joining us on the journey into nature's embrace. Subscribe for more insights and stories that nurture the soul. Until next time, stay grounded.